Thank you. I'm really glad to be here at the Basque Culinary Center and grateful to Jose and to Sasha for bringing me here. We first met in Copenhagen this summer, where I now live. Has anyone in the audience been to Copenhagen? Yes, I see a few hands. All right, well, I encourage more of you to come. Just a little about me before we start, because I hope you'll see this talk as a continuation of this entire morning, sort of a case study of how chefs can, not just chefs, right? We all say chefs, because that's easy to say. But really, we're talking about the entire cooking community. We're talking about front of house. We're talking about back of house. We're talking about the people who bring food to kitchen doors. We're talking about the people who grow it and the people working in science and labs. But I hope you'll see this as a continuation of a case study of how chefs and the cooking community can use gastronomy to make positive change in the world. And I think what each of you is looking for is your own way to make a difference, right? Everyone will have their way. So I arrived in Copenhagen about 4 months ago, so it's very new. And for the person who's been to Copenhagen, or few people who are out there, it's cold. So this morning, Denny told us that Mugaritz is at 43 degrees northern latitude. Copenhagen is at 55.5. So it took a while to convince me to go to this cold, dark place. Now I have a much heavier winter jacket, but I'm there. I kept saying, as I was talking about this job to my family and my brother's a chef, and he said, "Why won't you just say yes?" And I said, maybe if it were in Spain, it would be easy to say yes, right? But at least now the job has brought me to Spain, to here in San Sebastian. So, mad. So Christina explained that this mad means food in Danish, right? In English, mad often, in American English anyway, mad most often means angry, right? I'm frustrated, I'm pissed off. As my British colleagues taught me last night, in British English, mad means amazing, cool, sort of awesome. And then, if you are in Lewis Carroll English, the writer behind Alice in Wonderland, mad is this Mad Hatter, the crazy person who's willing to do impossible things, who's willing to stand up to any obstacle. So I think Renee, as the founder of MAD, really likes that second meaning. And in fact, I'll show so MAD was founded, I'm going to go back, by these three guys. You'll maybe recognize the American David Cheng on the left, who's behind the Momofuku Empire, Rene Redzepi in the center, and Alex Atala on the right. And we saw Alex earlier this morning in one of the videos. And these chefs were not after more magazine covers. They had made successful restaurants, and they started asking themselves, what really matters? They started saying, is there something more? And they were doing this, though this magazine cover was from 2013, they started asking this question a few years earlier. In fact, it happened after a congress where Rene would tell you he got frustrated because what was happening on stage was a bunch of chefs showcasing the latest technique for chopping carrots. Not really, but that's his exaggeration, right? And he felt like there was a more meaningful way to use conferences for chefs. He felt like there was more knowledge that needed exploration and a way to use these moments of bringing the chef community together to build community and not just be a spectacle for corporate sponsors or for a new technique. He wanted more exploration. I think it's really easy, I will just say, when you're within an educational institution to sort of take education for granted, right? Like this morning, we've seen amazing speakers from all over the world, but once you're out in the day-to-day work world, it's hard to figure out how you're going to keep learning. And so MAD is an effort to help build ongoing education for chefs. It's also this enormous community. So this is about 350 people who joined us for 2 days in Copenhagen this summer for our annual symposium. And they represent 43 countries, so really from around the world. this community believes very strongly, you might recognize Jacques Pepin on the left and his daughter Claudine, in learning from generations that have come before, and in being open and interested and learning from the experience of people who are at the beginning of their careers. This is Angela Di Mayuga from Mission Chinese in New York City. She told this amazing and difficult story about what it was like to open a restaurant in New York. Everything, right? She's managing the entire place, breaks her leg partway through, rent contracts, all of it. The challenges of really doing this work. So we really believe you can learn from one another. And these were actually breakout sessions we did at the symposium where chefs and students, everyone, academics, were learning from one another. 60 of the participants applied to teach these sessions. If you look closely at this table, you can see the conversations actually being led down on this side by some culinary students. And Alex Atala and Renee are like listening very eagerly, right? So imagine being, for days afterwards, Renee was talking about how he totally understood the future of the profession differently now because of what he had heard from these culinary students. So imagine being in that conversation. And we want to use those conversations to help shape a better food world. So it's really about taking that curiosity, those big ideas, and figuring out how to take curiosity outside the kitchen walls and put it to good use. So we knew this was fun, right? Because 350 people from the culinary community in Copenhagen, that sounds like fun. But I am American, and we're very practical. And we wanted to know that there was actually impact from this. We're also a nonprofit, and so we're putting a lot of resources into this 2-day conference. So I began to look for stories about whether there was a useful impact we could point to out of this 2 days. So one story I heard was about the Guts Conference, which happened in 2013. Do people know Shake Shack, the burger chain? Yeah? Okay, so there's more than 600, if you're not familiar, more than 600 Shake Shacks around the globe. They believe in high quality burgers, made to order. And they in the US, I think, are known for providing high quality, quick service. Their culinary director attended the Guts Symposium, which was about your guts, what's happening in there, about animal guts, about decomposition, about waste, about compost, about food waste. And Shake Shack's culinary director started thinking about their burgers. So see that burger? That's the burger they serve all around the world, or something like it. And they serve thousands of them every single day, perhaps more. And there's that frilly piece of green lettuce on the edge. So every burger they serve has a frilly, perfect piece of green lettuce. And you all know, the way I do, and the way Mark, this phenomenal culinary director, knew, that is not what a head of lettuce is made up of. To get that frill, they were taking the lettuce, cutting the top third, putting it on the burger, putting 1 leaf on each burger, and the rest was getting composted. Mark started thinking about how this, even if compost was better than the landfill, that there was a better way to move forward. And so he took, when they decided to put a fried chicken sandwich on the menu, he challenged his team to come up with a way to use that extra 2/3 of the lettuce head on the chicken sandwich. So now as they serve those chicken sandwiches, there's a finely chopped lettuce that is that waste product. So I felt like that's not a bad start for results from a 2-day conference, having a chain of more than 600 people change their food waste practices. This year we talked about sustainability within the industry and how you really create a profession that people can last in after age 30, right? How you can create a profession where young women can have families or men can have families, and how you work a sustainable life within it. And 2 days after we finished that Congress, Esben from Maemo, which you might know in Norway, it's a 3-star Michelin, he announced that he was moving to a 4-day work week. Now, that is a pretty remarkable shift for his team. So it's a place where these conversations will hope to change practice out in the real world. Now, the other thing that was happening behind the scenes was Renee started getting, and you all have seen this, right? Jose talked this morning about how like we're in this incredible moment for the cooking community. But it also means you will have questions thrown at you that you do not know the answer to. And Renee realized this when people started asking him, hey chef, how are we going to solve world hunger? Or, hey chef, what do you think of GMOs? And he started scratching his head and realizing nothing in his training had prepared him for that set of questions. So he sent an email to some friends, and it's labeled a crazy idea, and it went to Professor Paul Friedman and Mark Bomford, our friends at Yale University, and he said, I want to create a new type of educational program for chefs. I want to give them the tools to answer these questions. What would we need to do to make it happen? So he sent that crazy idea email late in November of 2014, and this year we took MAD to Yale University. We couldn't take the whole circus tent, so we took these 9 chefs. You'll recognize David and Alex, but then there's Michelle Trogro from the Maison Trogro, Kylie Kwong from Billy Kwong in Australia, where she's cooking with amazing Australian ingredients, but from her Chinese heritage. Jessica Koslow. Jessica is a young American chef who is taking the nation by storm. She's preparing California food that's sunny and delicious, and it's in a diner. So we put 3-star Michelin chefs together with young chefs opening diners. Renee. Rosio was a former pastry chef at Noma. She's Mexican-American, and she's now opened what I think is like the best taco stand in Copenhagen. Olivier Rollinger, formerly of Maison Bricot, who now runs a spice shop, importing these incredible spices from around the world, and April Bloomfield. So this was the group of 9 we brought together, and we said, we're going to run an experiment this week. No social media, right? So imagine if people took away from your social media from you. You're going to sit in classrooms pretty often, and we're going to learn about complexity. So we often want there to be one answer for the food system, for what's right, for what's wrong. In fact, this, if anything, shows that the food system is complex. This one's about, that first one was about factors influencing obesity. The second one is about the results of genetically modified crops and the yield that results from them. So if we learned anything that week while sitting in the classrooms, it was really that food systems are complex, but that as the people most involved and as the people the media is turning to right now, we have a responsibility for learning some of that complexity. So we did classroom lectures. These are some, Michelle is looking at the oldest known recipe to man. It's a stone, and the recipe has actually been chiseled into it. We went on field trips, and this was a salon where chefs said to students, here's the issue I need to know more about. Food justice, women in the industry, indigenous foods, and students researched those, and then there was like an exciting conversation about those topics. So we hope to do more of this in the future, assuming we pull together the funding, because we think that can really help continue the educational role for chefs. So we've been to a circus tent, we've been to a university. Now I want to take you out into the woods. So if you know the story of Noma, you probably know that when Renee founded it, he limited himself to Nordic ingredients, right? And again, remember, we're up at 55 degrees north. And today it's about 1 degree there, and there's just shy of 7 hours of sunlight. So you can imagine some days it feels pretty tough for this to be your pantry. And early in the process of Noma, when things got depressing, they would actually go out into the woods or to the seashore to get inspired. And that was when they began discovering all these wild foods that could be foraged. And when we bring chefs out into nature, we see consistently that no matter how many burns they have on their arm or how many tattoos or how tough they are, their eyes light up, right? They get absolutely delighted and excited and joyful. And so we've started to ask the question of how can we bring that to other people? How can we inspire that feeling in other people? And part of it is driven by health, right? We know, like, when we're out in nature, our blood pressure goes down, our mind calms, so there's probably something good happening for our health. The other thing is it's probably good for the environment. Our chefs, at least, have noticed that their respect for the environment and their sort of alertness to the environment and their sense of ecology has shifted as they've started to forage. So right now, we are looking ahead. We're training foragers. We're working with forest rangers from across the country, and they, after they've been trained, will take children and the public, adults, out into the woods and into these different landscapes so that they can have that same experience and have, like, a new relationship with nature. Now, foragers and forest rangers are not always the best chefs. It's not their training, right? So we're providing training from cooks from NOMA as well. And this is a really remarkable to witness this is really remarkable. These trainings are happening all in Danish, but at the end of the day, after I had observed two, and I understand very little Danish so far, everyone came up talking to me about the great techniques they had learned. So there's, like, intense learning going on here. And it's exciting because if you look at the literature on wild plants that are used, at least in Scandinavia, that literature is all about the medicinal or the botanical, but it's not about edibility. So for chefs, this is like a whole new area to explore. And now we're opening it up to the broader public through this program. So this is some of the food they've made. And while that may not pass muster here, right, or you guys might be held to a different standard, what we're really excited about is we feel like with these plates of food, as the foragers are teaching children, they're going to transform a relationship between wild and edible, between wild and ecological, and really help build environmental stewards for the next generation. So that's some of what we're up to. We really want, through our educational programs, to create these chefs that are literate not just in technique, but also in food systems, in ecological systems, in human systems, because I think that'll be part of the chef's role in the future, but it also is already. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions.